I've played tons of games, and throughout my life I've collected many games, some that were great, some that weren't so great. In fact, my collection strategy has been off the wall. I wanted to own games that people didn't talk about, the ones that didn't stand out as bestsellers, so I do have a mixed bag on the wall behind me that many of you see every day when I stream. That being said, one of our Epic community members, Lucrative Sound Scent 1274, requested a video talking about 10 games that I'm proud to own, and I do have 10 games in mind that fit the bill for this exact topic. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's begin. In the early 2000s, the computer that I owned, it couldn't really run anything. I had Windows XP and most of my dad's games ran on DOS, and I didn't really understand DOS, so it was a rough time. However, my grandparents always spent the money to have what would be considered a cutting-edge computer for the time. My grandfather was a teacher at St. Francis down in Houma, Louisiana, and he bought a decent IBM PC so that he could grade papers. When they bought it, they had the choice of 3 different pieces of software. They chose Microsoft Encarta, MechWarrior 2 31st Century Combat, and Torrens Passage. This game was monumental to me. It was the first point-and-click I ever played, and everything about it was wonderful. You make mistakes, you die, and then you get made fun of for it, but you don't lose. You can just pick up where you left off. Plus, it's chocked to the brim with humor from Al Lowe that piques the interest for both kids and adults. In comparison to other Sierra games, you wouldn't have to save often, you could just play it. And when I was able to buy a big box version of it a few years ago, I put it proudly on my shelf. I was not a fan of RPGs growing up. Period. The whole idea of doing the same thing over and over and over again, it really didn't appeal to me. I was born in an era where everything involved open worlds and collecting things within said worlds. Think Spyro, Donkey Kong 64, Jet Force Gemini, Crash Bandicoot, well, to some capacity, that's what I was used to. And for the same amount of disinterest I had in regular RPGs, I really wasn't interested in JRPGs. Then one day when I was stationed in South Korea, I downloaded Final Fantasy and I fell in love with the franchise. I loved 1, liked 2, hated 3, dug 4, fucking despised 5, and then when it was time for 6, known as Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo and US regions, that game blew my mind. From start to finish, Final Fantasy III was an experience, a blueprint into how JRPGs could be perfect. At no point was there filler. There wasn't any fetch quest padding bullshit, it was just straight up narrative fire and creative gameplay from the moment we started the game. It had a blend of character depth, story-driven momentum, and flexibility in gameplay that I feel no other JRPG has ever come close to. Because I love the game so much, I decided to get it complete in box. I'm not really one for getting boxed games, but I felt it was worth it in this case. Collecting games is always fun. It's especially fun when you look forward to playing one very specific game, and to me, Super Castlevania 4 was exactly that. I went through the process of buying the first 3 NES games, and I told myself, since I knew that Castlevania 4 was going to be epic, that I wouldn't buy it until I beat all 3. Castlevania 1 was epic, 2 was kind of and 3 was the bane of my existence. Out of all of the games that infuriated me to no end and ended up on the dreaded fucked off list, Castlevania 3 was on there 5 times before I finally beat it. The minute I beat that damn game, I went to the local game store and bought Super Castlevania 4. I do own it complete in box, and it looks great. It really appeals, it pops, and it looks great on the shelf. I have always loved Chrono Trigger. I loved Chrono Trigger back at a time where I didn't even know what a JRPG or an action RPG was. To me, all games were adventure games, just some had extra quirky mechanics. When I was a kid, Dad gave me tons of ROMs to play on Z-SNES. That was the emulator of choice that I used as a kid. Speaking of emulators, I've been thinking of placing a new series in rotation, one that focuses on explaining the emulators you might need if you want to play these games on your computer or on a mobile device. If that interests you, let me know down below. But returning to the topic at hand, Chrono Trigger was one of 3 games I played religiously, the others being ActRaiser and Bahamut Lagoon. which was a translated version. Through and through, I always wanted to complete and box Chrono Trigger, but it was one of those games that were expensive as fuck, like beyond expensive. So when I went to Japan on a vacation with my wife, I had one intention: get Chrono Trigger. But everywhere I turned, it was still expensive, even for the Super Famicom. Then I stumbled into a secondhand store, and there it was, Chrono Trigger complete in box for about $10. Why? A microscopic tear in the corner of a box. You see, the Japanese culture is very big on preserving the integrity of the items that they resell, so any flaws can discount a game 90%, and I lucked out on that day. Super Mario Bros. 3 is a very common game, one of the best-selling NES games, and one that you can find anywhere you look. If a store sells video games, especially retro video games, you're gonna find Super Mario 3. It's the same as Sonic the Hedgehog 2, no matter where you turn, you will find it. What made acquiring this game so special to me, however, was that it was one of the first NES games I purchased when I started my collection. What you see behind me every day started with 5 Nintendo games, the first 2 Zelda titles, and the first 3 Mario games. It's insane to think that that collection has expanded to over 1,000 games, and I have the luxury of sitting down and checking them all out with you every single day. Now, I will say my box is fake. It's actually a reproduction box, but to me, it looks just as good as an authentic box, and since I don't resell my stuff, who fucking cares?
Red silhouettes are terrorists. The white silhouettes are innocent civilians. Now you gotta try and hit the terrorists without hitting the good guys, okay? Oh yeah, the black cars.
One of my biggest ambitions in collecting video games was completing a library, but I knew that I wouldn't be able to do so on a library that spanned a wide range, so me being me, I focused on what people didn't know about, and that was the Action Max. For those of you who don't know what the Action Max is, it's a VHS light gun console that overlays these shooting targets on your TV, and if you shoot the targets, you get points, and after 13 minutes or whenever the tape ends, you're done. The sole replayability of this game lies in beating your high score, and to me, the novelty would wear off pretty quickly. 4 out of the 5 games are very easy to find, but the 5th one was my own little conquest of searching, and after 5 years, I found it. Blue Thunder, an extremely rare game that literally nobody cares about but me. It's based on a movie, but what makes it rare is that there were 2 commercial runs of the Action Max, one with a pack-in of Sonic Fury, and the other being Blue Thunder, right? So the only way to get Blue Thunder was to buy that extremely limited second run of the console. I found it on eBay one day, cost me $400, and I never turned back. I know I just talked about buying an expensive game, but I don't do it often. In fact, I rarely do it because to do so would prevent me from buying a larger part of a library. For $150, you can get a few Super Nintendo games if you really wanted to, but this is a game that I had to have because it was Quintet, and literally every game I've played by them, outside of ActRaiser 2, was great. Fuck ActRaiser 2, dirty saggy nutsack. This game was actually suggested to me by one of my Twitch viewers, and when I saw the price, I kind of puckered the exit tunnel a little bit. But a bit down, saved up a little bit of money, and let me tell you, this is one of the greatest action RPGs ever created. To me, it's up there with Chrono Trigger, just a solid, kick-ass, inward-thinking game that eats up so much of your time in a way that feels redeeming. Soul Blazer has us playing as the servant of the master, which if you've played ActRaiser, you know who that is, and our job is to destroy monsters and restore the souls of the people who inhabit the worlds we visit, no more no less. And it's simple, and it's fun. What more could you ask for? The largest library that I currently maintain is my PS2 library. I started collecting in high school with money I earned at oddball jobs like selling programs at LSU during football games or being a cashier at Kanata's, a little grocery store in Houma I would work at during the summer at my grandparents' house. That was a time to be alive, to bring a $20 bill into GameStop or some other game store and walk out with 1 or 2 used PS2 games. You never knew if they were going to be good, you just bought it, and you know that's the life I lived. The one game that absolutely blew my mind out of my asshole was Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. As a kid, I didn't care about playing games in order, I just wanted to play the game. But by playing Metal Gear Solid 3 and falling in love with it, it sparked the interest in playing games in the order that they were released. In fact, a few months later, I would go and buy the Metal Gear Solid Essentials collection that I still have to this day. Beat it over a weekend, just binged this epic series from Konami. I'm sure many of you had a handheld console growing up. I did. I actually had a few. While I never had the original Game Boy, I did have the Game Boy Pocket and the Game Boy Color, and I had a fistful of games, but many of them weren't popular. I guess Tetris was, but that was also a launch title, so everyone had it. The game that actually took the most of my time, and still to this day remains one of my favorite handheld games, is Game & Watch Gallery. Have you ever played games that are revisions of older games? Ones that let you change out the graphics between new and old, like Halo Anniversary Edition or Secret of Monkey Island Special Edition, or maybe even Diablo 2 Resurrected? That's kind of what this is, except you can play 4 different Game & Watch games in the style of the originals or in a remade fashion, and I love this game. While I could never get into the older LCD handhelds, I 100% was addicted to the modern ones. Growing up, there were many ways you could acquire software. You could go to the store, Office Depot, Walmart, Babbage's EB Games, Funko Land, the usual suspects. But for me, getting games during the school year, that was tough. And there was only one way that I could convince my parents to buy me a game, and that was the Scholastic Book Fair. If you remember the little pamphlets that came out, the last page usually had video games, and they were usually always awesome. They weren't limited to stupid edutainment games, they had some badass stuff. One year, Sonic CD was on it, and my dad got it for me, and it bricked my computer. That's the life, right? My dad never bought me a new computer. He was one of those guys who would build a computer with old bullshit parts he found, so up until my high school years, I never had a computer that was remotely decent for gaming, so I had to rely on older software. As an adult, once I bought a Sega CD, I made sure that I bought Sonic CD because I was always curious to beat it. I remembered the intro and the song that went with it, and it was a happy memory. Sonic CD is my favorite Sonic to date, which isn't hard considering I've played all of them up to Sonic Adventure, which I fucking hate. I honestly don't collect for Sega CD as much as I should, and to me this is the one game that I wanted anyway. And that's it for today's episode. What games are you proud to own? Feel free to let the community know down in the comments section below. Who knows, maybe you'll share a common collection accomplishment with another member. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.